Well, I'm Jerry Burr. I'm down on Mike Lawrence's estate here at High Bridge in Somerset. We're going to show you around now to some of the equipment he's got here. Old vehicles of this era, way beyond redemption, I would say, but you never know. We're also going to look at some very interesting old-time harvesting. Well, we're talking about 100 years of agriculture on this particular farm. And we aren't going to get much older equipment than the old farm wagon behind us. Not quite as old. We got Francis Hill, a local lad who's been in the agricultural business in the sales side about 40 years, I believe.
That's correct.
And we're going to use you to our advantage today to give us a few details about things. Now, I remember these old carts well, but you reckon this one was probably made locally, Francis?
I'm not absolutely sure, but it's highly probable this was made by Wensley's or Days of Mark, the adjacent village down the road. They made wagons of high quality before my time, but in the early 1900s, and they did in fact export them. You know, quite a lot of countries in Europe had them.
Well, like yourself, I've seen them made. And I was only talking this morning about those old shafts. One of those shafts would have been made out of one piece of wood, despite the curves in either direction. And it was hand-sawn without any electricity available.
Correct.
We have here a draw bar where it's made available to a tractor, but originally we'd have had the horse in there, wouldn't we?
Yep.
Now these things...
hay ladders, or hay rays as they were known as in this locality.
We call them racks up on the mend.
Racks up on the mend,
Yeah.
right. Well, they all had local terms.
Yeah.
I've heard them called raves as well, but not in the term that we might think of today.
But all the styling of these things, although they were purposeful, they were beautiful and artistic, weren't they?
Craft.
They're beautiful things. And the old wheels, people will give a lot of money for just one wheel now, won't they?
Yep.
And I was once at a museum, and the chap at the museum was showing some children around, and he was telling them about the steel bonds. And quite honestly, he didn't have a clue on how these bonds were put on. Now, you can remember, I expect, your local blacksmith bonding?
My grandfather actually did it.
Did he really?
He was a farmer, and he kept a carpenter on full time. That was my mother's father. He shod horses himself for the local people, and they used to build the wheel in the carpenter's shop.
The wheelwright shop.
The wheelwright shop. Yeah. Bring it out, heat up the iron bond in
on
the
a big
forge,
steel plate.
on a steel plate.
Yeah.
And then when the bond was red hot, drop it over the wheel, 3 or 4 men pouring water on to cool
that
it
was
down.
our job as kids in the local garage, going around with the water. And it was lovely to see it. I mean, there's some good bonds on that one. Yeah. Of course, they would shrink on there, and
they would shrink and hold the wheel
never
together.
move.
Yep.
But it's wonderful stuff. And what else can you tell us? This is the old
drug shoe.
Yeah, that would put under the wheel for downhill.
That's not quite a drug shoe. That is a roller that went down on the ground and would roll on the ground as well, which was all right on a smooth surface like a tarmac surface.
He'd run.
But most of them had what they call a drug shoe.
Like a cheese shape.
That the chain would let it go under the wheel, and then it would just be dragged along with the cart with the wheel not turning.
And not long ago, I was in Dorset on a steep hill there, and there was an old plaque on the side of the road that was ordering people to put their drug shoes down on that particular hill.
Oh, yeah.
But drivers would know what you're on about now. They just drop down a gear and that would be it.
Yep.
But she's a lovely example of an old cart.
It is, and
now,
it's still very
I'd
sound.
call it a hay wagon. What would be the correct term of it?
Well, if you go back to the Constable paintings, it was called the hay wain.
The hay wain, of course it is. That's a wonderful reference to it.
Yeah.
Okay then, we'll move on.
Right.
And what have we got here then, Francis?
Well, that would have, the wagon would have been the very early days of haymaking, when they would have pitched it onto the wagon with pitchforks and pitched it off again onto the stack.
Of course, you never see a hay rick now, do you?
No.
Not as such.
No.
And our fathers and ourselves too have been involved in haymaking when you had the skillful man up there making the rick so that it didn't fall down.
That's right.
And then the thatcher come along afterwards to put a roof on it.
If a man built a rick and it did fall down, he'd have to move out the village, wouldn't he?
I was once nearly forced to move out of the village because I drew a cartoon of a man who let the rick go down, and he nearly drove me out the village for that. But that's another story. Right, this is phase 2.
This is phase 2. They would have then, with a hay sweep, have brought the hay into here, perhaps 2 men pitching it there, and then perhaps 2 men on the rick putting it around and making it. Usually one forking it to the man who actually made the rick and made the edges.
And did you ever do double pitching? My mate and I, we used to get one each side, double pitching and loaded up.
Oh, into here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Double pitching, and that used to eventually jam up the poor old chap on top of the rick, was invariably the farmer who say, "You chaps better take it easy a minute and have a drop of cider."
Or words to that effect.
Or words of that. Okay then, Francis, now tell us all about this particular bit of machinery. It's been painted up nicely.
Yes, this has been restored quite nicely. It is in fact a Massey Dickey haymaker. They called it a swath turner because that was its main function. Each of these rotors would turn the swath over onto dry ground. But you could also, by changing these levers and put one rotating inwards and the other one rotating inwards, you could in fact turn two swaths into one and put just, for ready for picking up with the elevator or the sweep. Yeah. So it was a dual purpose machine, but its primary function was as a swath turner to turn it over, get the butts up and get them dry, as they say.
Yeah, turn it over and dry it.
Yeah.
So I want to do that today, I expect.
That's right, any minute now.
What year would this one be? Because we didn't get many cases over here until the war, did we? The East End.
This is a case model D, which was a very popular size of tractor.
Yeah.
And this would have been imported into this country from America during the 1940s.
Yeah, because we had this lease lend agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some people listening today who probably aren't aware what that was. It was a hire purchase agreement, more or less, we had with America, which took us a long time to pay it back, didn't it?
I was going to say, I expect we've just about finished paying for it.
You and I, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Case, a great firm in America, isn't it?
Jerome Case, who was the man who started the company, was a fantastic man. He was a Scotchman who emigrated to America and made thrashing machines to start with. He then got onto steam engines.
Steam, yeah, the old steam engine.
And then the tractors came as a later part of the huge company. In fact, the company has gone right through now, and I've been selling Case tractors for the last 30 years.
Have you really? Oh, well,
so it has great attachment for me.
Yeah.
But Case is now amalgamated with New Holland because of the times that we're going through.
Yeah.
So,
But a great firm, and I can always recognise them, not through brilliance, but because they're all the same colour.
That's right.
That's one easy thing about recognising tractors, I think.
Alice Chalmers had a similar colour, but
bit different.
A bit lighter.
Yeah, a bit different.
Yeah.
Now that we're going over to something made by the International Harvester Company.
Yeah. Well,
the old McCormick.
International. This is one of the very earliest pickup balers.
Yeah.
There were hay balers before this that were stationary, which we shall see later on, where you had to fork it into the baler and then two men were operating the tying of the baler. But this was an automatic tying pickup baler, and this was one of the very first ones that I ever remember in the early 40s.
Early 40s, you'd say that was?
Yep.
And that's International's own little engine in there? Or?
Yeah, that was the same engine that they fitted in their very small tractors.
Yeah.
There was a B45 baler came at a later date.
And that would have been made in Great Britain?
It was assembled in Great Britain with, I think...
We find that with the B, because that was something I have learned over the years about International. Some were made over here, and they were the ones with the B. And my B models in front of them.
Well, all of the tractors where you have got a W6 and then you've got a BW6, it will be a British-built tractor.
British-built tractor.
They were actually built at Doncaster.
That's right, yeah, up at Doncaster. Something always, identified by its colour, the old flat twin engine there.
A real big boy, this is the John Deere G, which was the largest of the twin cylinders that John Deere ever made.
Was it? A beautiful example, wasn't it?
This would have only been operated by either a very wealthy farmer or an agricultural contractor. Not many people would have been able to justify the expense of this.
Quite an expensive tractor, even in its day.
Yes.
So what would this be? Sort of just post-war?
That's just late 40s.
Any idea what price they would be then?
I would hazard a guess. A standard Fordson during the war was controlled at £125.
Yeah.
And I expect this tractor would have been 600.
Well, that's a big difference in it. Like you say, you had to be
brave.
The Rolls Royce tractor, this one, isn't it?
That's right.
Well, we can't talk about tractors and leave the Ferguson out, can we, Francis?
It would be a sin to do that.
But Harry Ferguson, I mean, he invented the first one, which I think was a David Brown.
Well, it was
Ferguson.
made by David Brown.
Made by David
for
Brown.
Harry Ferguson. It was called the Ferguson Brown.
But a great inventor, wasn't he?
Oh, he revolutionised farming in his methods without any question or doubt.
When do people see so many of these still about today?
Yeah.
And they just think of them as a simple little tractor. But as you said, they revolutionised the farm industry as far as the farmer was concerned. And I remember farmers buying these, some of them not even having their own car, using them to pop down on the dirt patch and things like that. But let's have a look and see what changed the world as far as tractors were concerned. It's this back end, isn't it?
It's the hydraulic linkage on the back, and the part of it that really revolutionised it, which Harry Ferguson had the patent on, was the method of depth control and the way it transmitted traction to the tractor by the suction on the plough pulling the tractor down, and that gave you more traction on a small
Although
tractor.
we got a small tractor, it had the grip, and whereas before a small tractor would have pulled a plough of that size.
We've now come to a rather unusual bit of kit with which I'm not really very familiar, but this is a reaper and binder, which is sort of more of use during the 1920s.
As old as that?
But this one would not be that old.
Oh.
This is one that's been imported somewhere. Sorry, it
Blair
comes
Gowrie
from
from Scotland.
Scotland.
Yeah.
It probably has been adapted in some way to cope with modern reed combing requirements. I think it's probably a baler, a reaper rather, that would have been used in the 1930s and 40s, but has been adapted in a different way. And I'm sorry.
That end bit would have folded down.
That would have folded down for
because I can
transport.
see the wooden piece, what they call the wooden piece that sort of guided through there.
Sails.
That's the
they're called.
sails.
Yeah. The sails brought the corn back onto the canvases to
I
be
see.
taken up and stacked. This is a conventional dung spreader of about the 1940s and 50s, which you would have probably in the early days loaded it by hand, go out in the field and just, this one actually drives off the power
By prong,
takeoff.
not by hand.
Yes, yeah, by prong.
I know what you mean.
And the dung is conveyed back to those
Yeah.
flickers at the back, and it just chucks it out and makes a very good job.
And she's driven through a shaft that's
The shaft from the
drive on the
tractor.
back of the tractor.
There were also similar spreaders of this time that were driven off of the land wheels as well.
Oh, were there?
Mm.
So she'd take up a couple of ton on there, I should think.
About a couple of tons.
Yeah,
would
I
be
should think
plenty.
so, because
Yeah.
weighs heavy, doesn't it?
It does heavy.
Well then, we're getting on in age with the tractors now. This is a nice unrestored version of the old Fordson Major. What years did these come out? 45, 46?
Yes, just after World War II. Same engine as the standard Fordson,
Yeah.
but independent brakes, which they not had, and three-point linkage was an option, and power takeoff was an option.
And that three-point linkage was the old Ferguson system, because Fords once were the financiers of... There's a bit of a controversy there about the patent, wasn't there?
A big war.
Big war, yeah. And these had self-starters too, some of them, didn't
Oh
they?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
You could have electric start. Again, on this one we've got a dung loader, which is probably what was used to load that
The load,
spreader.
Yeah.
Which again, I mean, nowadays they have telescopic handlers and all manner of things, but
Nobody works hard.
not
Like the and I did
not,
years
not
ago.
like the NI, no.
Something else unrestored. Lovely example of the old standard Fordson here. And what's this adaptation on the front here?
This would probably have been operated by an agricultural contractor. It has a big winch on the back and would have been used for mould draining, which is what the plough
Oh, that's
does.
the mold drainer plough.
And that,
Yeah.
that is really a mould draining outfit.
So with the mold drainer, they used to dig right down under the ground, didn't they? And dig right the way through. Sort of go down in and like
way it works,
a bullet-shaped thing on
This-
there, isn't it?
This trips and goes down into the ground, and this bullet goes along, and this expander behind it and then you have whatever depth you go down to, which would probably be about 2 foot, would be a hole that lot size right through the land, and the water would run into that hole and out into the ditches.
Very necessary around the levels in this area,
That's
I suppose.
right. You would normally have sort of dropped it in the ditch and then pulled away gradually up through the field so that the flow would go down to the ditch.
That's interesting. We didn't have anything like that on the Mendips. You couldn't get down. You couldn't get down that deep on the Mendips.
You didn't need it.
No, that's right. The water ran out. That's where the water come from here, running off the Mendip. Now then, a bit of Bamfords here. And this is getting to the sophisticated style of cutting grass now.
Well, this was really an upmarket version of the mower of the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, yeah.
It had rubber tires because people tended to run the roads a bit more.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it didn't serve any useful purpose. But it is a conventional mower which would have been used, that type of machine would have been used probably for 60 years, I would think.
Is that a bit bigger than the horse-drawn ones, or the same size?
Most horse-drawn ones were 4'6" if a horse had to. That is 5'6".
That's I thought you looked a bit bigger.
They did have 5'6" horse-drawn mowers, but you always had to have 2 horses to pull it, or else an engine to drive the cutter.
Yeah, yeah. Which not many farmers went to that luxury, did they?
No, no.
Another of our tractors with the loader on the front. This time we got Nuffield. Yeah. Now, Nuffield, of course, was Lord Nuffield, wasn't he?
That's right.
Sir William Morris of Morris Motors. And they didn't make a tractor till after the war, did they? I understood, you can correct me, they started building tractors in the factory where the old army lorries were built. Because the production of army lorries dropped after the war, this is the same factory that they set up for the tractors.
I wasn't sure about that bit of history, but this is a tractor of the late 50s, but they did started in the sort of late 40s.
Yeah, they tried to compete with Fords, didn't they, and with Ferguson. They tried to build something. Well, everybody was trying to capture a market.
There was a vast market for tractors.
This would have been challenging the Major, obviously, the later Major.
Yeah.
Well, now we're up what might be known as the tip end of the exhibition now. And the strange thing I'm just thinking about, I can look across the field there and see the motorway with all the modern stuff going, and just a field away, here we have these old relics. What have we got amongst this Aladdin's cave, if we could call it?
Well, this is what they term in the vintage world as in need of restoration.
Very much.
You have in the corner there a class. It was a baler of a sort. It only made a very, very loose sort of a bale. The continental people seem to like that way of conserving.
So that's continental.
It's a German machine made by Claas, and it just virtually gathered the grass up in and put some string round it.
Yeah.
It didn't really compress it seriously. No. There's the relics there of an old reaper and binder.
It's a Fordson Major.
Relics of a Fordson Major of the sort of 50s.
50s, yeah. Chicken houses.
A couple of chicken houses.
Another
machine made by Jones. That is a Jones Tedder, which was a very, very popular machine. I sold quite a few of those in the early 60s.
Well, somebody one day will get the wire brush out and a tin of paint.
It may well be. It's not gone too far.
But come to that, it's quite artistic to see it how it is now. I'm sure there's lots of people who will sit here and make a lovely painting of that.
I love looking at people's junk heaps.
Well, we've certainly got a good, sort of ringside view today, we put it then.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on. A bit more fascinating junk here. The old advanced diesel roller. These go back into the sort of late 40s and 50s because small diesel rollers like this were much more popular and useful than the steam rollers. Most of the steam rollers had a disadvantage with the rolling tarmac because you have to reverse the steam roller, which meant reversing the whole steam mechanism. Therefore, there was a dwell between forward and reverse in which the roller would sink into the tarmac. With these modern diesels, they could just whack them from forward to reverse very quickly and did away with that dwell time. And here's a typical example of one of those old rollers. And there she lies, wrapped up in leaves and stinging nettles. Well, this is a rare beast. Certainly, as far as I'm concerned, you've come across them before, obviously, the Turner.
I've known them. They've been in this area for quite a long time. Kellens of Cannington actually tried marketing them very hard with not a great deal of success because they were so expensive.
Yeah.
But this came in the early 50s and was a V4 variation on of a diesel engine, which was unusual, and farmers do not accept anything different.
Nothing different, no.
But
you can see the construction is a beautifully built thing, isn't it?
it's nicely engineered, but it didn't have a great success story. Unfortunately, the one customer of mine that had one spent more on it in repairs in the second year than it cost.
It was a good idea at the time.
It was a good idea at the
So that's the Turner, and I see they advertise themselves as the Yeoman of England.
The Yeoman of England.
Now, what about this little job then?
Well, this is the International Harvester Co, McCormick, whatever you like to call it. This is the W4. This was a very popular tractor on farms in this area. It was nice and easy to use, much faster on the road than a standard Fordson, much more nippy, more economic on fuel. It had independent brakes, belt pulley and power takeoff.
Much more advanced. Of course, America were really into tractors a long time before us, weren't they? And I should never forget our local farmer when he turned up with one of these. Some of them thought, that's not going to last long on a farm, but didn't they do a grand job?
They were wonderful little things. They compared to a horse, you see, it would work all day. It didn't get tired.
No.
And also, it was adequate power for most people.
It's amazing the power. There's only a 4-cylinder petrol engine in them. The alley charmers, we always called them there. What model is this?
This is a Model B.
That is the B, yeah. The very popular B.
They were, in fact, originally brought in from America, and then this will be one that was actually assembled at Totton near Southampton.
Oh, is that where they assembled them, down there?
Yep. And they
of course, a lot of them would have been lost on the way over during the war, obviously, with the merchant ships.
As time moved on, a lot of the parts were made here in this country.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the engine was still from America.
Imported.
This was more in vogue after the war than it was during the war. It was during the war we lost a lot at sea.
Could have done.
I'm always thinking I'd like to get down and pull some of them up.
It's there to be recovered. Well, we're back to the old traders again. This is a typical site, isn't it? A few years ago, just a typical farm trader. Probably something he put up, made from an old horse-drawn too, or whatever.
That would have been a cart that would have been in use every day of the year on most farms.
Yeah.
You could put low sides on it and haul dung with it. You could haul hay with it. You could haul corn with it.
Put his milk churns up on the back and take down to the gate, because everything was picked up in churns in those days.
That would do it.
They certainly got their money's worth. And you always saw a wonderful range. I know I can't recognise the wheels on there, but I love going around some of these old farms trying to recognise the particular, some old American car, pre-war wheels.
I think this is a bit later than that, because that was a trailer that was probably built by Lamperts here in Somerton.
Oh, was it?
Yes, I think so. Well, it looks like a Lampert, or else it's a Keen. I don't know which it is, but it's
you're the expert.
Fairly popular on local farms.
Harry Ferguson designed the first of the Ferguson tractors, which was the Ferguson Brown with David Brown. Then there was a Ford version. Then after the war, they tied in with the standard, the Roots Group, when they produced the tractors with the famous standard engine, as you would see in the standard Vanguard, and of course the Triumph TR2. And so it went on until this stage with Massey Harris, the Massey Ferguson. Another big Massey Harris here. The bigger variety, 745. Another Barn Duffields. So we have the ring parade started now. And in all my life of commentating at Castle Coombe, I always find it amazing that we get a bigger crowd around the ring for the tractors than any other vehicle. Here, a famous old standard Fordson, slightly modified with a Perkins P6 diesel engine. Here they come, that interesting load on that interesting old vehicle called a Pattison, but it's basically a Model T Ford. That wonderful old vehicle that were made in their millions by Henry Ford. Simplicity, No gearbox as such, just a set of clutches there. You had to learn which foot to press, etc. to get going, and I had the good fortune of driving that last year, and got a little bit confusing from time to time. It's one of our Nuffields. Gorgeous colour, the Nuffield. Many of the early Nuffields were fitted with the same engine, basically, that were fitted to the Morris lorries just after the war. And then, of course, diesel came in and proper tractor style engines were produced then. Isn't it amazing how people enjoy a ride in something different? It doesn't feel any different when you're there, but it's the novelty of a ride. I think as human beings, we're a strange lot. We do enjoy a ride, don't we? Not only just to save our legs, but there's something about it. It's a rare Alice Chalmers, it's a bigger one. Alice Chalmers produced one model called the Model U that held the tractor speed record at one time. But it was not held here at Castle Coombe, I can assure you. There she goes, bouncing and throbbing away the big field marshal that we talked about right at the beginning of this. It's a good solid tractor, but not the happiest to sit on all day long, bouncing up and down. Just look at the interest there of our crowd. Chairman's son on his way round now, on his own little Alice Chalmers B. Very proud owner he is. And the famous old standard Fordson. Now this would have been a wartime model, which you can see by the smaller mudguards. They cut them back to save metal during World War II. There's the little typical grey Fergie, the Roots model Ferguson, with a petrol TVO engine. These were so popular. Every farmer wanted one, because a lot of farmers, even up until the end of the war, didn't have their own car. They used to get around with a horse and cart, and many of them used to drive these little Fergies to the pub at night or to the dart match. Another famous British bit of tractor there, the David Brown. The Massey Ferguson. And an International. Somewhat different than that old Titan, isn't it? It's the McCormick Deering International. All these names tying in together. But tractors have got bigger and more powerful over the years. They used to be such docile, gentle old things, jogging along the road about 12 miles an hour. It's another of the Fordson Majors. Now they keep up with the everyday traffic, which I suppose is a good job when you're travelling behind one. And here we've got a fine example of one of the early cabs fitted to the Nuffield tractor. Years ago there was no such thing as a cab. You just sat out there, possibly with an old sat bag tied around your shoulder to keep the wet off your shoulder blades and neck, trying to keep off the rheumatics. Now they got modern cabs with power steering and stereo. Not so in those days. Typical of some of the Internationals, offset so you can watch your furrows and work. Wonderful variety of tractors here. Now we spoke earlier about the standard Fordson with the cut-back mudguards during the war. This one would have been slightly post-war, or perhaps up to about 1940-41 with the full-width mudguards. But they were lovely old tractors. Only one foot pedal, that was on the right. You pushed it right down for brake and halfway down for clutch. Our Alice Chalmers, a bit bigger than that slender B we saw. And the grey Fergie. Produced with a variety of engines. Petrol, TVO, this one's got a diesel engine in it. The ever popular Fordson Major. Yes, I did say that it's always a very interesting parade. People come to that ring and really crowd around it. Whereas I try to interest them in sometimes the lorries and motorbikes and whatever you have. And the tractors always draw a crowd. As I said, we're right in the heart here of agricultural community, and they do love their tractors. And some of these farmers have owned these tractors and probably used them on their farm for many, many years. And now, rather than part with them, get them up nice and tidy in a state of preservation and proudly take it along to shows such as Castle Coombe and other shows, and show it off to the crowd. And that really is a sight of beauty, that little leyland there, isn't it? Now these old sweeps were originally horse-drawn, weren't they?
The early sweeps that I remember would have been a lot smaller than this, probably only about 6 foot wide. The tines would have been shorter, with 2 handles on the back going like that. The man behind, the horse in front, we'll start at the beginning, with 2 chains coming back to the outer edges of the main beam. And then when the man got to the elevator, all he did was just lift the sweep slightly. That would mean that the tines would dig into the ground.
Up he'd roll.
The sweep would roll up over the mound of hay, down on the ground again. He'd go round the mound and on out to get another lot.
Then with the tractor, of course, they pushed it in and just reversed and...
Yep, this sort of came in the 20s, I would think. But again, it was very slow progress in mechanisation in farming in those times.
Mostly it was just to adapt the horse-drawn stuff to a tractor, wasn't it?
That's right.
Nothing purpose-built.
These sweeps were more commonly used in the 30s when farming became a little bit more prosperous.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the 40s really brought it all to light. People
with the 40s and oncoming of the war, we were forced to produce more on the farms then, and we had such luxuries on the farm called land girls and things like that. You didn't have anything to do with them.
Well, they were a bit old for me then. The thing was, that was the first time that farmers had a bit of disposable cash that they could buy some things, but also, of course, there was a shortage of labour due to the man being called into the services.
With the old Fortune tractor, that's about the most common tractor that was in use before the war, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they used to come out in orange before the war, and then because of the being spotted from above, Fords painted them green, didn't they?
Right.
And that would be an early one, because during the war they cut the mudguards back, didn't they?
Right.
To a narrower mudguard to save metal.
Yeah.
But I love these old Fords, and let's go and have a look over the old tractor.
Right.
There we go, an old 4-cylinder engine.
Yep.
Start on petrol.
That's right.
Run on TVO.
Yep.
Start on the handle.
Yep.
Eventually.
Yeah.
And then you used to sit up on the seat there, trying to get in gear for about 10 minutes.
Well, that was mainly because the clutches were a bit suspect, they're subject to abuse by farmers, and then the clutches would get a bit difficult to operate. But when they were new, the clutches worked all right.
Yeah. Well, I drove one of these in a quarry as a chase-side with a mechanical shovel on.
Yeah.
And you've got the drive down here for driving your machinery, and the power takeoff for it. But what I thought was lovely and simple about them was the fact you only had, now she's got the pedal pen down there, that's because the brake's on. There's only the one pedal for the clutch and right down for the brake.
Yeah.
And of course you'd have a hand throttle on it,
Yeah.
and just a 3-speed gearbox over there.
That's right. It had to be simple because the farm workers of the time they were frightened of them.
That's right. They weren't brought up in a mechanical age, and if you had to do too many things at once, they had a problem.
Oh gosh, this was a major step forward.
The old standard Fordson was the forerunner, I think, of all our tractors. In fact, I have heard the Fords were the first tractor builders to build a tractor that was built upon the engine or unit construction, like the engine and gearbox. So before that, they had these old chassis, like the old International Titan sort of thing, with a stationary engine cocked on the top.
Yeah.
Now then, Francis, you keep confusing me by the minute. Now, I thought gripes were something we used to get as kid, and Mother used to give us gripe water. This is a griping plough.
This is a griping plough in Somerset. The drainage system on most of the lower land, hundreds and thousands of acres of Somerset, are only just above sea level, and they have what they call ridge and furrow, and the furrow is a hollow, which they call it in this locality a gripe. And to keep that gripe in shape, this was built by Twos of Tiverton, and it does in fact go down through the gripe and cuts 2 slices of just only a small 4-inch by sort of 8-inch, like the furrow a plough would do.
Yeah.
And then these 2 discs, just throw it up on the bank. The end of story. That thing can proceed all day. The option is a man with a shovel for weeks and weeks.
Anything but hard work, innit? Well done. Thanks for that. Well, you know as well as I do, Francis, old Mike's a proper magpie when it comes to collecting, and the stuff he's got here really is amazing. And we've been talking about a few makes of tractors, including internationals, but nothing as old as this.
No, I think this is the oldest in his collection. This is the International 1020, which first came on stream in about 1923 and went right through until the late 30s.
But virtually unchanged.
With very little in the way of changes at all. It was a serious competitor to the standard Fordson, and although it was more money, Henry Ford gave up making tractors in the late 20s or early 30s. I think it was the late 20s. He did then start again in Cork in Ireland in 1933.
I remember the old Irish model, yes.
But the International is the one that gave him the most run for his money.
Oh, she's going back a bit. But just another example of what Mike has here.
Yes,
I begin to wonder if he knows how many tractors, bits and pieces he has got.
I have asked him and he doesn't know.
Oh, well, we'll move on. Francis, you said this was worth a mention. Tell us.
Right, this baler was very, very popular in this area. Came on stream in the late 40s, 46, 47, 48. And this was built in Britain by the International Harvester Company. It was called the McCormick B45 and was probably the highest volume seller of a baler that I ever remember in those times. Well, another interesting part is this bale sledge on the back here. If I could just show you how a man had to operate, he would stand on here, grab the bales as they came off and stack them in this form, and then you pull back this catch with your foot and tip them like that, and they would go off and be left in a stack of 7 or 8 bales. The only thing I would tell you, if you had to work this all day on a hot summer's day, it didn't do a lot of good for your sex life.
Tiring. Good for you.
Here we see a trailing plough, which is quite an unusual sight nowadays. These were very commonplace in the 20s, 30s and 40s and even well on to the 50s. The old tractor would have been on the iron spade lug wheels, and the plough was not attached to the tractor. It just towed behind with a pin. When I say not attached, it was attached with a pin, and you tripped it with a rope, and that's the way it always worked, which was a progression from steam ploughing onto this.
Yeah. Right, when you talk nowadays about motor mowers, that's what everybody wants to cut their grass in front of their house. But when we used to refer to motor mowers as kids, it was because a farmer, ingenious that they were, had developed a motor operating grass cutter from an old car. Now you know something about the local chap who actually built, this was his original, I understand.
This was Tom Moss Heel, his name was, and he lived just across the road at Highbridge, and he was one of the pioneers of adapting cars and cutting the back end off of them and doing these conversions and bolting the mower up under it, and with the reduction in drive, you see the reduction from the small cog down to the big cog on the wheel, made them travel at a sensible speed for mowing then. In fact, I've still got an original leaflet of his offering this conversion, which is this cog here and the big cog on the wheel, for £3.17 and sixpence.
And not a lot of people could afford it.
No.
So this is based on the old Humber, but that's back in the 20s. That's before Humbers knew anything about Roots Group, I think.
That's right.
But look at the lovely long chassis. That was a noble car in its day, but now look what it's doing now.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's nice to think that's his original. Well, Well, later on we should be seeing even more exhibits. There's still plenty here. But we're going to say goodbye to Francis for now. He's done a grand job. So for now, thanks again for your invaluable help.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Standard Fortune in dark blue. When they changed the colour, just after World War II, from dark green to dark blue, then they went to the dark blue major, and then of course onto the light blue. And here she comes, our famous Titan. They weren't too artistic about their styling in those days, purely functional, isn't it? And you can see they parade around the ring and then they line up in the middle. And the crowd are then invited in to have a session with their cameras or conversations with the owners, and that's how things are learned. And we even get tractor spotters there, you know. You don't only get train spotters and plane spotters, we got tractor spotters at these shows. Another rarity here, this is the John Deere. John Deere of America, well, great and famous make. That's got a flat engine, a horizontal engine, but this time twin cylinder. There's the Fortune with the high lift. And that's the little Ferguson with the gold engine when they upgraded the engine. And here's an old Field Marshal back in her original state, look, unrestored. But I'll bet that'll last for another 100 years yet. But every time they stop and just tick over, that poor old driver really shakes his ribs about, despite the padding. These are unusual little David Browns, as much as they got a side-by-side seat on them. This was useful when they were pulling contract equipment from farm to farm. The second man could always ride on the tractor. Something that hadn't been thought of before. You either sort of stood up on behind or come on behind on his bike. Another version of it here. You can see how he sat offset there. Some of these are beautifully restored. And Castlecombe is one of the early rallies in the season, being held in May. And you can see the satisfaction on these chaps' faces that at last they've started their rally season. It certainly is a long parade because we have a lot of tractors here. It takes a long time to motor them gently into the ring. Then they line up and then we have to chat about them again and keep the crowd happy with the cameras as they mosey on back to their hard standing again. But it's a lovely place here, Castlecombe, and for tractors, well, this is the place to come. Interesting Fortune here, it's the Fortune Dexter, but it's been converted. Do you know why? Because the driver is an invalid and he can get up in the back of that with his wheelchair. He's not going to be missed out. Good luck to him. The sign on the front of this little Alice Chalmers here shows it's got a Perkins engine. That'll be the 3-cylinder P3. Later Massey Ferguson, complete with cab. He's got the another Perkins engined track lane tractor on the back there. Alice Chalmers, I believe. More equipment fitted to the Fortune Major. As you can see, these are very common, very popular, these Fortune Majors. Many of them still working in our fields. Now then, it ain't all British and American. A lot of people, these yuppies, are fond of having a Porsche. I bet they wouldn't like one of those to drive up and down the city. That was a Porsche. You can sense the reliability when you listen and watch that old Marshall, can't you? Marshalls of Gainsborough. Of course, always a well-known producer of steam before that. One of our little market garden, probably a Ransom. Once again, unrestored. It's nice to see them this way. One of our old characters with his little Ferguson. He used to bring a tractor he built himself, but I don't think it's advisable to bring that too many times. Little Pioneer roller there. Doing a fair rate of knots. What a fine and colourful lineup it is. Reds and greens. And a few blue. Very interesting blue here, the little Unihorse. One of our miniature tractors designed for the market garden. A small plot. Not a toy, although it certainly looks like it. Many of these tractors you can tell by the colour, because the manufacturer stuck to the same colour all the way through. That is, except Fordsons, who for different eras and different reasons changed their colours from orange to dark green to blue and light blue. Well, what's it like to own and run a tractor at these rallies? Good fun, and with good comradeship, I can assure you. They always get plenty of attention, and that's what people that exhibit at rallies like, not in a conceited way, but they like to talk about their particular pride and joy. And these old tractors are their pride and joy. Some of them have got quite a collection. They aren't the people that go on a sort of London to Brighton road run, although there have been road runs for tractors. But they're a pride to own and a joy to run in a leisurely sort of way. And that's the way you want to feel when you go to a rally of a weekend. You don't want anything hectic, do you? Not many starting problems. There's that interesting Perkins engined standard Fordson there. And our Pattison, still carrying the staff around. Yes, Model T Fords were not only built as cars, they were built as trucks and many other agricultural and industrial adaptations. Many of these owners and drivers will leisurely make their way, as they are doing now, back to the bottom of the field where all the tractors are lined and parked up together, and switch it off and have a chat, and then wander around, possibly to the Alta Jumble, to see what else they can find, bits and pieces. Of course, all vehicles owners do this if they're in the restoration business. See what they can find, and it might be something to start them building yet another vehicle, or it might be something just to keep the old one going. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know how many of these little Fergusons were built as a result of Harry Ferguson, that famous Irishman's masterpiece. By inventing that three-point system, he revolutionized the use of agricultural tractors. No longer did you have to clutter up your farmyard with various pieces of machinery. They were much smaller as they all fitted onto that three-point system. As I said, they start easily, but not always. These big McCormicks built by Internationals were some built in America, but International did have its own factory over in this country and produced literally thousands for the farmers. This is the son of Mike Lawrence, who's got all this equipment here. Ross, I think your pride and joy is the old Lord Louis over there, the Wallace Stevens, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my main interest. The rest of it comes as a sideshow, really, but I've always been brought up with the steam engines.
What year is that one?
1919. It was made for the War Department, but it's obviously never used because of the end of the war. And it was sold to threshing contractors in Petersfield.
Made by Wallace Stevens of Basingstoke. And what horsepower was that?
It's a 7
That's
nominal
a 7,
horse.
is it? Yeah.
It was an expansion engine, but due to problems in 1929, it went back and had it all removed.
That expansion system was sort of a single, but made to compete with the compounds, etc., wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Today she's driving the Marshall thrashing drum there, or thrashing machine, if we call it up on our area.
Yep.
And that is merely doing what?
Well, it's a reed comber. The machine itself is a 1940s machine. The comber up top is actually brand new. It was actually made about 4 years ago by an old elderly gentleman in Yorkshire for thrashing out the reed for thatched roofs. I say the Marshall machine is just a basic bog standard thrasher.
What year would the main machine be?
I think it's around 1940. It's one of the last ones. It's all steel, all on roller bearings.
And stuff there, yeah.
Yep. It's one of the last of them.
Of course, this is just a hobby of yours, really, not a full-time job. You just do work like the devil over the weekend just for the sheer fun of it.
Yeah, and the week now, it seems to take over more and more time. And the old man's getting older as well, so he can't do as much.
He wouldn't like to hear you say that. But anyway,
I'm sure he would.
You've done a grand job here today and many other days we've seen you working there. And long may you and Lord Louis go around and do a little bit of work at the steam shows.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross. We're honoured now to have the man himself here, Mike Lawrence. Lovely to see you, Mike. You pleased with the weather today, I dare say?
Very pleased, yeah. The prayers have been answered.
Yes, they needed to be after yesterday's turnout.
Oh dear, yeah, soul
You
destroying
must have been
yesterday.
a bit depressed at that
Very
point.
much so, yeah.
Anyway, thanks for coming along and sparing us a few minutes. You're a busy man.
That's all
We've
right.
had a word with your lad about the Lord Louis, the Wallace
Yeah.
Stevens up there in the top end of this,
Right.
about the separating
Yeah.
up there. Now you're going to tell us what happens on the back end here.
Well, if he's giving you the gen on, obviously the comber on top of the thrasher, it is separated and the good straight straw is combed and brought down this conveyor here, nice and slowly. It then drops into the trusser. This has been slightly modified to bring the strings closer together. The thatcher's like a nice tidy bundle. So we've modified to move the knotters in about 9 inches, or to 9 inches I should say. And that is tied and trussed, compacted and then into a sheaf which you see on the trailer ready for thatching.
Well, that's fine. Well, it's all technical stuff, but this all technical stuff was carried out by people that were just called farm labourers years ago, and I think it's underestimated the amount of knowledge those old people had back in those primitive farming days.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree that. A farm worker really was jack of all trades. He could turn his hand to anything all the year round, whereas now one man just can only sort of do the job he's trained to do.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well,
yeah.
you've got a wonderful collection of stuff here, and
Thank you.
I said to our last chappie we were talking to, I wonder if it's any good asking Mike how many tractors he's got here. He said, I'm sure he doesn't even
I don't know actually. No, I don't.
What made you sort of think of today?
Well, I've had it in mind to sort of do a haymaking demonstration. Of course, the weather again, as you can see, it's caused us a problem. Nobody's done hay. People have done harvest, you know, Star Payne and places like that. But we thought we'd like to do a hay one. I've had that on my mind for about 15 years now. But then we thought, well, if we leave it late enough but early enough, we'll try and combine hay and harvest together.
And of course with the centenary.
Yeah, 100 years of the family being here, yeah. Grandfather came here in 1901 and he was quite a big farmer in those days and made a lot of cheese and butter and that sort of thing. You've probably seen on the leaflet. But yeah, and I'm third generation here.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people appreciate what you've done today. And
Well, I hope they do.
And him up there, he's showing us
Yes.
the sun shines on the righteous. Mike, there's no doubt about
Well, I'm
it.
glad you came then.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Thanks
We'll see you
ever-
later.
Nice chatting to you.
Okay,
Thanks. May it go on being a good day. Cheers,
Thank you
mate.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.